General Ramey's goal was to cover up the truth about an alien presence that deeply concerned President Harry Truman, who wanted it all kept secret from the public and the media. The investigators reported, quote, powerful electromagnetic field emanating from the wreckage. It caused all photographs and videotape recordings to be overexposed. They lost all photographs. The craft had crashed in the Shaitan Mazar Gorge, also known as the Devil's Grave, in the central Tian Shan Mountains of eastern Kyrgyzstan. It has been 69 years since the front page of the Roswell Daily Record on July 8, 1947 headlined, Roswell Army Airfield captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. No details of flying disc are revealed. We now know that Colonel William Blanchard, commanding officer of the 509th Bomb Wing at the Roswell Army Airfield, ordered his public information officer, Walter Hott, to issue a press release that one of those UFOs that everyone was seeing in 1947 had crashed during a thunderstorm northwest of Roswell near Corona. Strange debris had been found by sheep rancher Mac Brazel on July 2nd. But within hours after that news broke, Commanding General of the 8th Air Force, Brigadier General Roger Ramey, along with his Chief of Staff, Colonel Thomas DuBose, held a press conference in Fort Worth, Texas. The two men spread pieces of a shredded weather balloon around them to say there had been no crash disk in New Mexico, that what came down on that ranch near Corona was only a weather balloon. General Ramey didn't mention that Roswell radar film and tower logs showed, this is a quote, the merging of 3 radar targets prior to collision and subsequent crashes, close quote. Those were not 3 weather balloons. The 3 sites were called Landing Zone 1 near Corona, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell, Landing Zone 2 at the Trinity site in White Sands Proving Ground, where the United States tested its first atomic bomb in July 1945, and Landing Zone 3, 30 miles east of Alamogordo on the Mescalero Apache Indian Reservation. The crash vehicles were not round discs, says the government's own historic documents, such as this first annual report of the Majestic 12 project. The subject was, quote, a review of President Truman's special panel to investigate the capture of unidentified plan-form space vehicles by U.S. armed forces and agencies, and plan form means a delta triangular shape. General Ramey's goal was to cover up the truth about an alien presence that deeply concerned President Harry Truman, who wanted it all kept secret from the public and the media. Since then, many different military and intelligence whistleblowers over the years have leaked firsthand information about non-humans interacting with Earth. One of those military whistleblowers even did an important 1997 book, The Day After Roswell, about what he knew firsthand of UFO extraterrestrial technologies and ETs while working in the Pentagon. Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso worked as chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk for General Arthur Trudeau, who was handpicked by Dwight Eisenhower in 1958 to be Director of Army Research and Development in the Pentagon. And General Trudeau handpicked Colonel Corso after their trusted days together in World War II. Colonel Corso told me that he met General Trudeau in his Pentagon office, where the general handed over extraterrestrial artifacts directly from a filing cabinet, a bank of 3 that were in his Pentagon office. All 3 of the file cabinets in the drawers had extraterrestrial technologies retrieved from these crashes that they were gathering. So it meant they took them directly to the Pentagon in the beginning. The general asked Colonel Corso to secretly hand-deliver ET artifacts to selected contacts in a few American corporations, where back engineering and patenting of ET technologies would be a top secret national security priority without anyone in Congress or the Supreme Court or the tax-paying American public to know anything. Trudeau and Corso were the beginning of the United States' serious efforts to develop a secret space program that would use retrieved extraterrestrial technology for advancement. And meanwhile, NASA, under CIA control, never forget that, and NSA was born as under the thumb of NASA, while the world thought it was a public civilian space agency. NASA, under CIA control, would be the public camouflage for what was behind the scenes, a dark and growing underbelly of America, spending trillions of secret dollars, but unknown and untouchable by the white world of Congress, the Supreme Court, and the American taxpayers. In June 1997, Time magazine did a cover story on the 50th anniversary of those Roswell crashes. I was in Roswell to speak for that 50th commemoration, and there I met and talked with Colonel Corso about his work for General Trudeau. When Colonel Corso was introduced to me, he extended his hand to shake mine, and he said, quote, "How the hell did you get so much classified information?" Close quote. We had a very good talk about animal mutilations that he knew a great deal about, too. And he meant the animal mutilations that I had investigated for my TV documentary, A Strange Harvest, that first broadcast May 28, 1980, on Denver's CBS station KMGH-TV, where I was director of special projects. That's when sheriffs and ranchers told me the perpetrators of the bloodless, trackless animal deaths were, quote, creatures from outer space, close quote, and that was based on their experiences. Ranchers had seen glowing lights and a night sky emit a beam down into their pastures. A few had even seen an animal lifted up in a beam or lowered to pastures, dead and mutilated. But none of those eyewitnesses in 1979 to 1980 would stand in front of my TV camera for fear of ridicule. And as probably most of you know by now, humans are more afraid of other humans and their ridicule and their sarcasm than they are of extraterrestrials. And before he died, Colonel Corso talked to me in private about the highly classified documents that he had read in Washington, D.C., dated as early as 1951, about animals found in several parts of the world with bloodless excisions and no tracks around them. Colonel Corso said the classified reports that he read specified that the perpetrators of animal mutilations were, quote, extraterrestrial biological entities, close quote, but why? Eventually, our government would realize that many of the UFO pilots and other non-human entities were cloned androids or human ET hybrids produced from genetic harvests of Earth life, including animal mutilations and sperm and egg extractions in the human abduction syndrome. And this illustration is by a Missouri horse rancher in 1975 who saw this glowing being with his son, they were in a truck together, at his gate during a time when he found several newborn foals and young horses bloodlessly mutilated in his pasture. Our government, according to Colonel Corso, learned that in spite of the mutilations and abductions, some ETs are friendly, and they want humanity to advance faster to be more protected from unfriendly ETs. So there was urgency in General Trudeau's goal to get alien technologies back engineered and patented as fast as possible, to keep them out of the hands of our perceived human enemies, and to support a secret space program that might have to battle in real Star Wars. Colonel Corso wrote about the secret ET technology transfer to American corporations for back engineering and patents this way, quote, General Trudeau also had relationships with the Army contractors who were developing new weapon systems for the military. within one part of, let's say, a company or corporation, while another part of a company or corporation was harvesting some of the same ET technology for consumer product development. These were companies such as Bell Labs, IBM, Monsanto, Dow, RCA that became General Electric, and the aviation and medical companies of Howard Hughes. So you've got the front of the corporations, they know zero. What they want to do is use a back end in which maybe two people know that they have gotten from the Department of Defense, General Trudeau, let's say, they don't know what it is, but today we would call it a laser. And the idea is the back end of the corporation will do everything it can to get it patented. And once it's patented inside of an American corporation, it should be safely out of the hands of Russia, Germany. And then the front part of the corporation finds a commercial application for the back engineer that will go first for weapons, and then they will find a way to use the technology from extraterrestrials for the vast majority of people who they are telling are alone in this universe and there is no such thing as ETs, why they're going to make $1 trillion off of ET technology. At that July 1997 50th anniversary conference, Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. handed me this replica of the thin I-beam he remembered holding in the first week of July 1947. That's when his father, Jesse Marcel Sr., the head of intelligence at the Roswell Army Airfield, woke up Jesse and his mother to show them strange silver foil and I-beams that Jesse Marcel Sr. had picked up at a UFO crash site between Roswell and Corona, and that was between July 2nd and July 5th, 1947. Jesse Marcel Sr. said that the metallic foil was like cloth that could be folded or crumpled up, but would always return to its original flat, unwrinkled shape. Jesse Jr. told me that his father said directly to his mom and to him, this debris, quote, was not of this earth, close quote. So definitely not the phony weather balloon story that General Ramey concocted on July 8th. The guys behind the scenes who were out there in the field, they knew exactly the government was lying through its teeth from the beginning. Young Jesse Marcel was most curious about what he described as metallic pinkish purple hieroglyphs or symbols that ran along the entire length of a dark tan-colored I-beam, only 3/8 of an inch wide. The I-beam was so lightweight that Jesse Jr. said he could hardly feel it in his hand. In fact, he said it reminded him of holding air and somehow being aware that he had something in his hand, so that the air had some tangibility, but that it was that light. Plastics did not exist publicly in 1947, but later on, eyewitnesses would say the I-beams were similar to what was going to come and be developed in the world, lightweight plastic or balsa wood. There were rumors that scientists had discovered the I-beams were an exotic hybrid of metal like wood. It could not be cut, it could not be burned. Intelligence officer Jesse Marcel Sr. would himself compare the strange pink-purple symbols to, quote, indecipherable Chinese writing, close quote. And now we know that only 12 years after the Roswell UFO cover-up began, that Brigadier General Stephen Lufkin was briefed at the Pentagon in 1959 about the Roswell UFO crashes. And right there, he was shown thin I-beams with what he called purplish encryptions. An encryption is encoding messages of information in such a way that only authorized parties can read it. Another way to think about it is in discussions with some of the CIA, NSA, DIA types, they're always looking for embedded mathematical language in patterns and symbols. Another source, Steve Lytle, reported that his mathematician father was asked by government authorities to, quote, decipher the I-beam symbols, but no one was able to. And those were not the only mysterious symbols to show up on UFOs. Much earlier, in 1803, on the east coast of Japan, in the Hitachi province, fishermen reported that a pale, red-headed, alien-looking woman suddenly emerged from under the ocean waters in a round craft that had symbols on it. The woman was inside the craft clutching a box, and eyewitnesses called her Utsuro Bune, meaning ship hole, because her sea craft was shaped like a rice bowl with a hole in it. People who saw the craft said the top was like glass or crystal. When the red-haired woman spoke, it was in a language that no Japanese person had ever heard before. What language was she speaking? Where did she come from? What was in that box? What makes things even weirder is that this same red-haired woman and craft were reported to have been seen in several other parts of Japan, and she was always holding the box. 177 years later, on December 26, 1980, after midnight, Staff Sergeant James Peniston at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge in England would also encounter a strange craft with symbols in Rendlesham Forest. When Jim dragged his fingers over the symbols, his mind was filled with zeros and ones of binary code and telepathic impressions of a time machine. This is his impression of a time machine from a distant future where an advanced civilization was dying out, and its mission was to harvest genetic material from Earth to use as, quote, band-aids to extend the future civilization's survival. There was no pilot. This triangular craft was like a drone operated with alien self-activating software. Now here is a comparison. Here are the two Utsuro Bune, Jim's. Here is the original 1803 when they wrote about this strange woman carrying the box. This was what was written as being symbols that they found and saw on this craft that came out of the water. This is enlarged here, and from there I took this. I put those red dots so you can see this is where they originally were. This is to compare to Jim Peniston's in Rendlesham Forest in 1980, not quite 100 years difference. And on August 28, 1991, 11 years after Sergeant Peniston touched the symbols on the alien craft in Rendlesham Forest, Soviet authorities were tracking a UFO on a zigzag course over the Aral Sea at 4,225 miles an hour. The rapid radar track vanished over Kyrgyzstan. A year later, in June 1992, a search party found a cylinder-shaped craft with strange green symbols on it. The investigators reported, quote, powerful electromagnetic field emanating from the wreckage. It caused all photographs and videotape recordings to be overexposed. They lost all photographs in the overexposure. The craft had crashed in the Shaitan Mazar Gorge, also known as the Devil's Grave, in the central Tian Shan Mountains of eastern Kyrgyzstan. And then 14 years after that, in June 2015, an Army sergeant with his wife, 2 young children, a dog, and a cat, they started down here in Savannah. He was at Hunter Army Airfield, and their destination was to go to Colorado up here. And their idea was that they were going to go on this road. This would be their first night, would be in Atlanta. The husband has asked me to call him simply Sergeant CJ. He is still trying to remain anonymous. He is still active Army. He stays in touch with me. And what I'm going to unfold now, just so that you will realize that everything I'm going to show now, he is still experiencing in his life on a regular basis. The two, the husband and wife, sitting in the front of the truck with the kids falling asleep in the back with the dog and the cat, were shocked when a bright white light in the sky suddenly came down toward their truck. Army Sergeant CJ estimated that the disc hovering above their truck in Wadley, Georgia, was 820 feet long, and that's nearly 3 football fields. And he said he's a pretty good judge because part of his job in the Army is to identify anything in the sky, estimate distance and size. And that's what he teaches for the Army. So this is about 820 feet long. He thought nearly 200 foot high. He said bright white sparks. He added some yellow when he did the illustration, but he said it was mostly white. The sparks were very odd. It's like for some of you who have been in the panel earlier today when I was talking about how we're dealing with technology where a tube of light can come down and then it just stops right in the air. And then there is space to the ground, and that this can do anything it wants to, come down as low, stop. It's not the way we think of light. Well, he said this big craft, where he tried to draw it and it really doesn't show it, he was critical of himself. He said there should be space here. That it was very odd, he said, to watch. He drew it the way humans would draw propulsion or exhaust. But he said there was clear night sky at both ends, so that this projected part seemed to be literally coming out of the air as opposed to the craft. And he remembered it because his mind as an Army sergeant dealing with things in the sky that he's supposed to analyze, he couldn't understand anything that he was looking at because it didn't make physical sense to what we know in machines here on planet Earth. And he was very aware that there were symbols right below the midline of this craft. His wife remembered the UFO's surface glistened with a dim oil slick appearance, like the surface, she said, when you have that rainbow color on a slick of oil and the sun is shining on it. She said it was like the whole craft to her looked like it was covered that way. When it tilted, it would shine this rainbow color. She also thought that there were round lights around the middle. CJ thought they were rectangular. These are the problems. Eyewitnesses, you need them, but eyewitnesses often are contradictory with each other. Now, this encounter from an Army sergeant who wears one of those watches that he's always looking at with a second hand and is always aware of the time, he remembered specifically looking at his clock when this thing just disappeared in front of them. It didn't move, it just blinked out, and he looked at his watch. It was 1:29 a.m., and he had looked at his watch when it first came down low. So the encounter was from 1:25 to 1:29 a.m. Eastern Time. And that was on the early morning of June 29th, 2015. Now, the far left symbol matches the Peniston from December 1980 in Rendlesham. This symbol is very close to Jim's upper symbol. The difference here is a third. There's 3 circles, one is in here. I knew when he sent me these images that I was looking at what I knew so well from Peniston, but I didn't want to say that. So I simply asked him, I said, have you and your wife, do you have any information about what happened in England in 1980? He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, have you ever heard of anything in something they call Rendlesham Forest? No, where is Rendlesham Forest? And we went in this kind of dialogue that he'd have to, I don't know if he were deceiving. He certainly didn't come across as anybody who had any information or knowledge about RAF Bentwaters. UFOs had no interest to him or his wife before this strange happening. So I think that when he says, I don't know anything about RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge, that it is probably fair to say that he's telling the truth. And the symbols on the craft were not drawn by Jim Peniston before 2010 December. So they had not been out in the world in any kind of a historic way. And yet, like the Utsuro Bune, CJ, Peniston, and other cases, we find repetitions of symbols on the surfaces that I think have to do with self-activating software. Just like that black drone in the forest. Now, Sergeant CJ and his wife were very confused about what had happened and how did their GPS, brand new, he knows how to work with GPS, no confusion. He had programmed it so that they would end up going through Atlanta and on up to Colorado. He made Colorado Springs the end of their trip. All of that had been programmed. He'd done this hundreds of times. There was nothing mysterious about using a GPS. And yet, they were diverted to Wadley, away from Colorado Springs. They were supposed to go from here, and this is where the encounter takes place. And I've talked with his wife too. She's more upset about this than he is. I think this room probably understands that you can have an interaction with the alien presence. It can manipulate minds, it can manipulate time, it can manipulate locations, and the human mind does not track with it. That's the way to think of it. The human mind is not tracking with what the non-humans are doing in terms of manipulation of time and space, and that no one in that car knew that they had made a turn going north. And a lot of people will say, well, it's just, I can't believe somebody could be sitting behind a steering wheel and the car is not going into the west, and they end up going north and they wouldn't notice it. You know people who say that and do that. This is one of the problems of trying to investigate and report about things in high strangeness. The high strangeness is a huge bottom line aspect of all of this phenomena, but high strangeness is high strangeness because we don't have paradigms for it. The vast majority of people don't have the same experiences. And this family, they're struggling to say, somehow we got off and we ended up in Wadley, Georgia, and this 800-foot craft came down over our car, and the next thing we know, it disappears. It says it lasted 5 minutes. We don't know how long it lasted. He tries to get the car started. He has problems. He keeps going, and he still thinks, he told me, Linda, I still think I am headed toward Atlanta. And he comes and sees a little gas station shop, and he pulls in, and he says, I'm going to get some gas, I'm going to get some coffee, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm feeling weak, I'm beginning to shake. He goes to try to open up the car door. He's having a hard time opening the car door. He goes to stand out. His legs want to buckle under him, and he is saying to his wife, I don't know what is going on. And he said, I staggered, and as far as I'm concerned, nothing has happened that should do this except that we had this strange large thing come down over our car, and now I am incapacitated, it seems. And he said he actually worked his way around his car to the front and then took a gamble that he would be able to start walking into this little gas store where he bought some things, has the receipt. I have all the receipts from this trip. But he was physically and mentally disabled. But they finally realize their mistake. They get on the road, they go to Atlanta, and the next night, June 30th, they've now gone further to a motel in Kentucky. And he goes from an exhaustion sleep, finding himself, as he opens his eyes, he's standing in the bathroom of the motel. He has the printed motel receipt in one hand. He has a ballpoint pen in the other, and he has written all of these squares and ones on the back of the 8.5 by 11 motel receipt, and you can see where his hand trailed off to a WTF at the end. Now, I know an Australian geneticist. He's brilliant with math. He's brilliant with binary decoding. He helped John Burroughs and me and an astrophysicist on the decoding of Jim Peniston's binary code in December of 2010. He's very good. And I sent this to him, and I simply said, do you see any binary code in this? And in a while, he sent back, Linda, here's what I've been able to translate. Continuous protection of humanity and a latitude, longitude. Expose hidden knowledge to, and these are all caps when the binary code people do the translations. There's lowercase and there's uppercase. This was uppercase in terms of binary code, all as if something was intent on stressing all citizens. Advancement imperative for planetary survival. Beware of Orion 1350.3 and Z Reticuli, not spelled the way we would. We put an E in there. This has a U. Reticuli 39.1, a question mark here on something right there, and 70. He wrote in this email to me on September 23rd, 2015, the two coded numbers, 1350.3 and 39.1, question mark, 70, tell us the distance in light years from Earth to the Orion Nebula, which is 1,350 light years, or to the binary star system of Zeta Reticuli, 39.17 light years. He writes, sources of grays. Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 has been cited as the source of gray types ever since the Betty and Barney Hill case of 1961. Is there anybody in this room who is not familiar with Betty and Barney Hill? Is there anybody? Okay. That's all right. Yeah. I'm so glad there's some new minds that are going to learn some of this. Betty and Barney Hill. It was the fall of 1961, the White Mountains in New Hampshire. They had been on a vacation. They're coming back. It's like 10 o'clock at night. The first thing they see is a bright white light in the sky. Barney pulls the car over, gets binoculars, gets out, looks at the light, and the next thing is he's going into an altered state. He says he sees eyes. Barney is never the same quite again. His wife, Betty, is not as affected. They end up in an abduction aboard this craft. This is what this turns out to be. The light comes down. And after it was all over, scuffs on the top of his shoes. He was dragged through the forest. His shoes were scratched on top. Betty remembered being with a gray being with larger, quite large actually, black eyes, but not slanted, horizontal, wearing some kind of a strange cap, who took her around inside of a room and showed her what appeared to be holograms, one of which her mind, under hypnosis later, could draw with a suggestion by the psychiatrist. Benjamin Simon was an extremely well-known, highly regarded, credible psychiatrist who was brought into this case, and John Fuller did the Interrupted Journey, excellent book that was made into a television show. So it was the psychiatrist who gave her a post-hypnotic suggestion to try to draw this three-dimensional hologram she saw in this craft. And to everybody's complete and total amazement, it began to match up with parts of our galactic arm. And eventually, an amateur astronomer, Marjorie Fish, took upon it to do this laborious, taking fish wire and doing vertical columns and putting beads of all of the known colors, sizes of suns in relationship to our solar system. And they ended up with a match of where she had drawn double lines as a trade route between Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2. It's a binary star system. It is 39.17 light years from here. And that this was their home source, but that there were other lines going out to half a dozen other star systems. And when you look at a map of where we are, and I'll show you one in a minute, but just to give you the idea that in 1961, Betty Hill, under hypnosis, after an abduction, missing time in the New Hampshire mountains, ended up drawing something that was identifiable in the work of an amateur astronomer doing 3D on this little arm that we're in the Milky Way galaxy, and they found matches, including Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2. That was the earliest. Since then, Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 has come up probably in over 100 abduction cases as being the source for at least some of the alien presence. The last translation, avoid signal messages sent. This is puzzling because it could mean avoid sending messages through CSETI, which is what Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and Stephen Hawking warned about this past fall, about don't go to artificial intelligence. We should not be sending out signals into the universe when we don't know who's there to follow them back to Earth. The Australians said the implication might be that avoid ET signals being sent. Another way to look at it, but I think it makes more sense that they're saying be careful of what you're sending out. So now let's go back to the first line that includes 49.27 north, this is the latitude, longitude, 11.5 east. When you go to Google and you type that in, you end up in Hohenberg, Germany. Hohenberg, Germany is about 100 miles northeast of Nuremberg. That was a very significant city for the Nazis in World War II. And it was the location of the international war crime trials after the war ended. But Nuremberg was also famous nearly 400 years earlier when immense black cylinders appeared in an early dawn sky and released many strange, smaller blue, black, red, and orange spheres, rods, and crosses. Many, many people watched these aerial machines clash in battle, that's what they said, above a great black spear that remained stationary for the hour-long battle in the sky. Some UFOs crashed and burned in this lower right. That's the depiction here. And this is a famous woodcut that was done by German artist Hans Glaser. So who in that aerial UFO battle might have been protecting humanity as stated in the CJ binary code, continuous protection of humanity that goes with this latitude, longitude? And what could the battle have been about then? And is there a battle now? I will offer one possible answer from the human abduction syndrome as we go forward. But first, I want to compare the CJ binary code download to another string of zeros and ones that went into a human mind on December 26, 1980. That was the night that Staff Sergeant Jim Penniston with Airman First Class John Burroughs and Airman Ed Kavansak were ordered into Rendlesham Forest to investigate strange colored lights moving around in the tall forest on civilian land running along the RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge Air Base, then NATO's largest air base. This is page 1 of the binary code written down by U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant Jim Penniston after he touched, by dragging his fingers along this black, glassy triangle, and when his fingers touched the symbols, his mind filled with zeros and ones after midnight on the morning of December 26, 1980. This is page 2 of Penniston's binary code, showing the analysis marks by 2 different scientists. Over here, this is their consensus analysis of how they are breaking down the binary code. Page 3, page 4, page 5, and you can see this is where the transmission stopped for Penniston. Now, summarizing this binary, exploration of humanity, there was unclear, the number 8100, another latitude and longitude, and the word continuous for planetary advance, 4th coordinate. They questioned, does that mean time? Continuous, more unclear, and the word before. This yellow highlighted latitude and longitude that centers around right here, this is the town hall center of Woodbridge, which is the nearest town to RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge in Rendlesham Forest. This was selected by the scientists as probably the most reasonable binary translation of that second latitude-longitude line, and that it would be the town center of Woodbridge, Suffolk County, England. And their reasoning was the binary, those zeros and ones that we just looked at, there were no designations for where the decimal point would go. And when you have a string of unbroken zeros and ones, it turns out that for latitude-longitude analysis, you could have 24 possible positions. So they worked their way number by number through all of the different permutations that it might be. And Dr. Horace Drew and Mike Reed, an astrophysicist who built telescopes for ASU in Arizona, they came to the conclusion that what made sense to them out of these 24 different options, one of those options went directly to where the town center latitude, longitude crossed, that would be their choice, because they said if this is a time-traveling drone, which is what Penniston thought, it would have to probably be putting out latitude, longitudinal positions constantly, a constant stream, and that it would make more sense that Woodbridge, that where it crossed at that town hall, this was close to where it was, but the ancient aliens used a computer guy, and he chose to put the decimal point in another place, and so the broadcast was High Brazil out in the Atlantic west of Ireland, largely to fit the ancient aliens' perspective. And when you read about what High Brazil was, it was a phantom island that appeared and disappeared according to people in boats west of Ireland. So it never was something that was really land, solid land. And that's why we think, even though these latitudes and longitudes are all possibility when you are not given a decimal, we think it makes sense that if this is a machine, it is broadcasting its position, changing latitude and longitude all of the time. Looking again, we've got continuous protection of humanity. This is the German Nuremberg, near Nuremberg, latitude, longitude, which may be reminding us of a battle in the sky. Think about this, because there's definitely implications of conflict among these non-humans. Expose hidden knowledge to all citizens. Advancement imperative for planetary survival. I've been exposed to this warning ever since it began being put in crop formations in the late 90s into 2001 and 2, and the same crop formation warnings were about beware of signals, beware of communication from certain things, and this issue of advancement imperative for planetary survival. It keeps coming up over and over. And this is comparing the two. Here's Peniston, has the same exploration of humanity, continuous for planetary advance, not as clear as this, but these are the same kinds of binary translations. Now, what happened in Rendlesham Forest was apparently of great interest to the Defense Intelligence Agency, remote viewers working at Fort Meade, Maryland, next door to the National Security Agency in 1986. Lynn Buchanan worked in a DIA unit called D as in dog, T as in Tom, hyphen S as in Sam, all caps. Their goal was to research the potential to use psychic abilities to spy in a program called Stargate. On July 14, 1986, one of Lynn's assigned practice targets was Rendlesham Forest incident at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge that had occurred only 6 years before on December 26 to 28, 1980. What Lynn saw in remote viewing might explain the repeating messages from both Army Sergeant CJ and 36 years earlier, the U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant Peniston, about some kind of advancement imperative for planetary survival on Earth, that means humans too, or the aliens' survival using humans and Earth, or both, that there's a survival issue for humans and non-humans, and we are somehow joined in this challenge to survive. I interviewed Lynn Buchanan recently about this 2008 CIA release document. He did not know the CIA had put this on a website. Nobody knew that the CIA had put this on their website until somebody got a hold of John Burroughs that I do Phenomena Radio with each week and said, go to this URL, and I get this email from John, look at this, exclamation point. And it was Lynn Buchanan's full, original, all of the notes that were transcribed from his 1986 remote viewing of Rendlesham Forest. He had never talked about this with anybody before. He was shocked when I called him and said, have you seen this? And he went to it and he said, my God, I didn't know. And he said, I thought we were doing all of this absolutely classified. And the target being Rendlesham Forest, he said, Linda, I knew nothing about RAF Bentwaters. I knew nothing about this target. They're not supposed to know. But that was today, what we now know, was the target for this remote viewing. And now, where I'm going to share with you is part of an audio interview. He has reached inside of the remote viewing in this report that the CIA has on its website. He is now inside. He knows that he's inside of a machine. He knows it's in a forest. Remember, he knows nothing about RAF Bentwaters. Literally zero. This is now looking from this perspective to this very important DIA remote viewing of Rendlesham Forest, and this is Lynn Buchanan, extremely talented remote viewer. He's now inside of a machine, and he is looking for a pilot and a propulsion unit.
I got that the driver of this vehicle is not in the vehicle. He's somewhere else.
Like this object that you are remote viewing in Rendlesham Forest could be a drone that is not manned, but that the intelligence associated with this is somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's when I got AOL break. Oh, I'm viewing ATs. So move me back to the place with the yellow light. That's when I got an incubator. I definitely realized that this young person, whatever, was in the place with the yellow light, and that it was an incubator. Putting my analyst hat on, I would tend to say from this one session that this craft was looking for an ideal place, and once it found it, that incubator would open up and provide a living space for whatever was in it.
And you mean that the incubator in the black glassy craft, which is the outside version we have from the Pennison drawing, it would then deposit the extraterrestrial life forms in the incubator in a site on this planet to grow into whatever those extraterrestrials are.
That would be the analysis of that one session, yes.
Now, you did other remote views on RAF Bentwaters later on.
I was tasked with finding the power source. In fact, I still didn't know really what the Bentwater thing was. I got the propulsion system was a very small, enclosed thing that didn't really hook up to the craft, but was in some way providing a field of energy around the craft. And it was in an enclosed container type thing. When I was told to mentally move into the container to find out what was going on, I was not able to do that.
And this is the black box that you encountered in that very first July 14th, 1986 remote viewing. You didn't know where you were at the time, and you didn't know what it was.
That was it, yeah. And this energy type box has come up in several other things, like Sacsayhuaman that has, I think, 100-ton stones.
Sacsayhuaman is in Cusco, Peru.
Yeah, and there was a tasking about how those were moved. I've heard a lot of people say those were moved by sound and all that, but that's not what I got in my remote viewing session. I got that there was some kind of an object that emitted energy that could surround something and make it to where you could just pick it up.
Right, it would neutralize gravity.
Yeah. I had a task one time of the Utsuobune, which was an ET that landed in northern Japan. In that case, this female-looking being came out of the ship. She carried this box with her, and she never let anybody have this box. And I think the box, whatever was in the box, was what made the ship move.
Time machines incubating alien life-seeding planets, ET hybrids, and clones. The Truman administration's MJ-12 knew all the way back on September 24th, 1947, that the, quote, evidence collected from recovered UFO crashes are deemed extraterrestrial in nature, close quote. That is directly from Truman administration documents. And in another part of the MJ-12 white-hot intelligence estimate, and Stanton Friedman thinks these are totally legitimate, it stated the ET technologies were, quote, eons ahead of us. Whistleblowers have reported that alien technologies can make their various spacecraft, androids, and other ET technologies invisible to human eyes. This naval ship fading into invisibility is an October 2015 Northrop Grumman Facebook posting. In addition to invisibility, the extraterrestrial technology is described as functioning with self-activating software that can neutralize gravity, project three-dimensional holograms as camouflage that human eyes and minds cannot detect in the Earth environment, with an alien goal to harvest genetic material from this planet's animal and human life in order to create a large, ongoing supply of rapid cycle cloned and hybridized body containers with very advanced technology that some people in the human abduction syndrome refer to as the resurrection tubes. I first learned about the cloning technology the first week of March 1991, when I received in the mail a large envelope that contained an audio cassette, letter, and several color drawings from a woman named Linda Porter. She was born in 1946 and began having very memorable experiences with non-humans by age 12 in 1958. She had decided it was important to reach me after hearing a conference presentation that I had given in California concerning eyewitness testimony about the non-human intelligences. She was concerned about her own vulnerability as a person caught up in the human abduction syndrome, and she was frightened about the United States government's policy of hiding the alien presence. Her letter began, quote, "We abductees are caught in the middle of a series of ongoing events that will one day prove to be historically significant to the future of the Earth. Unfortunately, because of our continuing non-voluntary interactions with these beings, we have, in a sense, become victims of both sides of the phenomena. On the one hand, we are used by the aliens for their own purposes, whatever those purposes may be. And on the other, if we speak out, we risk ridicule from the public and, in some cases, possible harassment and or intimidation by government and military personnel. If you could look directly into these creatures' eyes, you'd realize that every detail of your life, no matter how personal, how mundane, how minute, is known to them. It makes me wonder, are we some kind of Ken and Barbie dolls being played with by an emotionally immature race of beings with no sense of morality? Or are we pawns held in the grasp of a dying race, and it will do anything for their own survival, including the cold-blooded manipulation of another species and the brutal mutilation of helpless animals? Unless a person has been through the trauma of an abduction, they cannot comprehend how these entities can strip the mind and soul as easily as they can strip the clothes off a body. They can scan details of a person's life with such facility that they make you feel as if you are an interesting piece of lint caught between their toes. In the blink of an eye, these beings devastate all personal freedom, all sense of privacy, and all prospects for living a normal existence. A person's life is never the same again. He or she is changed forever," close quote. Linda Porter sums up the way a lot of abductees have felt at the beginning of their experiences with gray non-humans or other ET types. But many abductees evolve to thinking that the non-humans are actually trying to help humans advance to more stability, and that human advancement will help the non-humans to survive as well. I think it's one of the most important pieces to hang on to and use as a lens for anything that you hear, that survival is the bottom line for all concerned. There may be a lot of experimentation, but in the end, it may be that the Ebens are trying to do something that will end up being positive and actually enable humanity to survive its own destructive tendencies. The people who live on the earth, those who will survive the destructive changes to come, will be evolving into a new species of being. I'm not referring right now to the time travelers from Earth's future that are here also. Remember, this is a letter in 1991. No one knew about Peniston. Time travel wasn't really being discussed. That was something, the time travel, that was necessary because Earth governments got hold of a dangerous technology that greatly altered Earth's future for the worse. Remember the mistake that was made that I told you about for a while back? Some type of technology that was ET fell into the wrong hands, and the future travelers were sent back in time to change that. I don't know if it has been changed, at least not yet, but that was an entire sidebar evolution that was never meant to happen. And this is the story, for those of you who may know, about Dan Burrish, the Dan Burrish case, that ETs manipulating time ended up making a knot, and the knot in time is causing the Earth in this solar system to constantly be going around and around in catastrophic, repetitive destructions. Linda Porter was the first of half a dozen people in the human abduction syndrome that I interviewed who experienced being raised and lowered in a tube of light and passing through walls that, quote, felt like thousands of little feathers all over my body. That I have heard people say so many times when they're taking through walls, ceilings, floors, whatever. The beam is used only to transfer people from Earth to a craft and back, says Linda. The tunnel is a physical created whole from one dimension to another. Traveling through the tunnel was what made me ill, had something to do with the change in physical density of two different dimensions, close quote. Linda told me that in 1963, when she was 17 years old, she was abducted from her Covina, California home by gray-colored beings with large eyes. These gray beings seem to be the extraterrestrial biological entities or EBINs that are described in leaked government documents as friendly and concerned about Earth and human evolution. Linda Porter was shown a procedure to transfer the soul or life force from a dying man into a totally healthy clone of the man by a gray as a demonstration before the same procedure was done on Linda, because she had had rheumatic fever as a teenager and it had damaged her heart. The gray being explained to Linda Porter that it was vital that her soul entity continue in the same body container she had been born with in order to accomplish an unknown alien agenda. Linda said she was shown a soul transfer process on the man dying on a table in front of her, while a gray being stood closely by monitoring him. And then Linda saw rise out of the top of the dead man's spine a golden yellow-orange light that elongated in the air as it moved across the room to a row of body-sized tubes lighted from top and bottom and filled with a strange purple-looking gas. Inside the tube on the far right was a cloned body of the same man, but about 10 years younger. Linda Porter said there was a problem about Earth body containers, souls, other dimensions, and altered timelines. Quote, her writing, I was told that the resurrected cloned man would be relocated elsewhere, maybe Australia, and would continue on with his life, matching the soul and the container beyond his death in Minnesota, where he would have a funeral, and from our point of view, he would be dead. But the cloned, ET-activated body to continue the soul would be put in Australia with the idea that that man would never be recognized again as living on planet Earth. Linda thought it was vital to the non-human entities that the man's soul continue functioning longer inside the same kind of container that his older sick body had been. Part of the reason they take tissue samples from abductees when they are quite young is to have this tissue in reserve in case a new body for an abductee becomes necessary later on. Quote, new bodies can be stored indefinitely. The containers in the sketch with the 3 people in the tubes are storage containers. The containers in both new sketches that I sent you are activation containers. They have a light in the top that must be on the person for unknown amount of hours before a body can be activated if a body has been in storage. If the body is newly made, it does not need light. In the sketch with the 3 people in the tubes, the body on the far right was the younger one given to the man who died. I got the impression the aliens do not like to do this soul transfer very often. Actually, I got the feeling the aliens are not supposed to be doing this at all. But they seem to be backed into a corner, and they have no other recourse. They also seem to be trying to hide all of this from some higher form of life, whatever the authority is that prohibits this soul transfer, also prohibits them from interfering on this planet. Whoever it is much higher evolved than they are and wields a great deal of power over many, many other realms of existence. There is much, much more to existence than we could ever begin to understand. Much of what we have been taught regarding the physical universe and the laws that govern it is wrong. This creature's civilization communicates difficult concepts via the use of symbols and radiation of emotion. They use this form to get concepts across with their exact true meanings intact. No misinterpretations can occur this way. The symbols are not mathematical ones, but appear as 3-dimensional holographic pictures that resemble abstract sculptures. The emotional aspect is relayed via carrier waves that resemble sound waves but are not part of the human sound spectrum. These waves can be felt but not heard. If the creatures want to clear a certain area of humans, they can broadcast this carrier wave over the area at a certain frequency, and it will create intense fear in people, causing them to flee the area. It does not cause any harm, so they say. And it is worth noting that most humans cannot hear frequencies below 125 hertz or above 10,000 hertz. So this zone of fear that ETs broadcast would use frequencies above or below those hertz. And John Keel himself, before he died, we were on an airplane going back from a conference, and he told me that when he was investigating the Mothman prophecies in Virginia, that he remembered one day walking down was a dirt path, and he was out and going to a field area where there'd been some lights. And he said he remembered it was so dramatic because he was walking and his right foot went forward, and he suddenly said he was so drenched in fear he began to tremble, and he was so shocked that he went backwards. And as soon as he went backwards, everything went away. Everything was normal. So then he tentatively put his right foot back where he was about to step, and he was drenched in trembling fear. And he said, I rocked myself back and forth, going into a zone of fear, out. And he said, I realized then somebody is broadcasting something at this spot, and it is having this impact on my mind. For those of you who have followed John Burroughs and me trying to push forward more information in R.A.F. Bentwaters, which I'm talking about tomorrow in a longer workshop, we have been dealing with the UK Secret Eyes Only 460-page document about frequencies. We think they're in the terahertz range, very bizarre, weird frequencies. And it says right in this UK Eyes Only that was unclassified now, these frequencies from unidentified aerial phenomena that the UK call UAPs can manipulate human minds and damage human tissues. It's written right in the report. And I would give anything to finish this presentation